Here's a big one. How many times have you heard that the Bible is sexist? The Bible is anti-woman. The Bible puts women down. It makes them second-class citizens. And the first.
That's the Quran. It's not the Bible.
Well, I'm with you there, but that's been a complaint against the Bible.
But that was society as a whole then. It had nothing to do with God.
Well, you think if the Bible was really trying to elevate it, it would say something, positive. Well, it does, but I'm just saying a lot of people don't think it does.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts? Is the Bible as patriarchal and as demeaning to women as some would indicate?
Jesus was nice to women.
Yeah. Remember, tonight we're doing
the
more Old Testament. But you're right. Yeah, Jesus treated women extremely well. Anything in the Old Testament that you say, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like women are second rate.
Now the men went out to fight, the women stayed back home with the kids.
Is that sexist?
No.
Oh, okay. Just curious.
It's not politically correct.
Not politically correct.
Protecting the women.
So how are we going to defend this, that the Bible is really not a sexist document? It's Old Testament.
There's a lot of protection for women in terms of marriage if the man was displeased with her or something, that he had to actually take care of her and make sure she was taken care of.
Okay.
It wasn't. He wasn't able to arbitrarily just send her away, including if he had taken her in battle as part of spoils of battle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Return her back to her people as opposed to just turning her and letting her fend for herself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly one of the things we're going to talk about here. How about in Genesis 1-3? Did you notice there's nothing sexist going on there? People say, yeah, but the woman fell first, right? She's the one that took that fruit. Well, wait a minute. Right? Who was the admonition given to from God?
The man.
The man.
Supposed to be in charge.
Who is standing right next to the woman? According to that part, it says Adam is standing right there. So how dumb is that? God told him, and he lets this happen. I mean, to me, he's the one that's the problem here, not Eve. Also, if you notice, it says God made a helper for man, right? That's the wording. God made a helper. And a lot of people think, oh, this is 1950s television, like a helper. Like a man comes home, he says, man, am I tired? She says, oh dear, I'll go get your pipe. I'll get the hassock and I'll put it in front of you. Dinner will be ready. Just is it okay? Just 5 more minutes? And well, okay, puff puff on the pipe. That's not what helper meant.
Oh, bummer. Can I say that out loud?
Yeah.
I won't take the time because we've got to keep moving here, but there's a verse in more than one verse in which God is called our helper. Guess what word they use? The same word that they used to talk about the creation of Eve. So people say a better translation of that word instead of helper, because we got the idea that somehow the man is in charge and she's there to run around and get his slippers for him. Well, it means ally.
I was going to say, what it really means is the man is incapable of making decisions, so the woman is to help him.
Wow, okay.
That's a sexist
Reverse, is there such a thing as reverse sexism? It just means...
That's why he needed a helper. Otherwise he could have been fine by himself.
It just means an ally. Well, when you go to war, don't you want an ally that's as strong as you are? Of course. So this is not a put down on women to say that a woman was made to be man's helper. It's to be an ally, so we can get that out of the way. But the fall has messed everything up, right? It was the fall that said you, the man, are going to go out and work, and it says to the women, you're going to be dominated by men. It's not the way it's supposed to be. It's what we've done to ourselves, right? We've ruined that social order and everything. It all just came crashing down. Old Testament verses, good heavens. I'm not even going to read them all to you. I'm just going to show you. There's a section on the page in this book that I told you about, Is God a Moral Monster? Just a whole list of verses that talk about the importance of women alongside men, equal. So I'll just give you 2 or 3 here. Exodus 20:12, honor your father and your mother. It doesn't say honor your father and whatever you want to say about your mom. It doesn't say that. It says you honor them both, right? They're on the same level. Proverbs 6:20, my son, observe the commandment of your father and do not forsake the teaching of your mother. Right? She's doing the teaching too. Whatever she gave you input is exactly the same. Anybody ever read Proverbs 31?
Yes.
It's the ideal wife. You know what's interesting about that? It's from me. I'm just, I'm an English teacher, so this fascinates me. It's called an acrostic. It means every verse in Proverbs 31 starts with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So it'd be like us doing our first verse would start with A, next verse B. Okay. So do you see what they're saying there? The ideal woman is from A to Z. She's everything. Have you read some of the things that ideal woman is supposed to do? Does it say go get slippers for her man? I don't see that in Proverbs 31. Right? She's supposed to be out economically, checking land out, deciding if it's a good buy or not. She's raising kids. She's making sure her husband's okay. She's in the marketplace. She does it all. She's not relegated to some little spot. This is in the Old Testament. How about some of the strong female characters that are in the Old Testament? Let me just give you a real quick list of some of them that are in here. Yeah, first thing you think of is probably Deborah. How about this? This is just a starter. Are these some strong women? You bet. Sarah, Hagar, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, Tamar. There were Hebrew midwives. There were Egyptian princes. There was Zipporah, Moses' wife. Deborah, Ruth, Naomi, Abigail, Bathsheba. It says, don't forget that Proverbs 31 woman. So again and again, women play a role. Yeah, Deborah, for heaven's sake, she was considered to be a judge by all the tribes. She must have been amazing, right? Because they all said, we're in trouble. Whatever you say, we'll do. A woman. And they were willing to do that. So it doesn't put women down. Well, people say, yeah, but the Bible talks a lot about polygamy. Yeah, it does. How does polygamy work out? Terrible. Yeah. Look at the result. Anybody think of jealousies? Give me one family in the Bible that had a polygamous arrangement, and let's talk about some of the disasters that came out of that. Anybody you can think of?
Just one. David had
David,
more than one.
More than one wife. How did his kids do? They killed each other, literally, right?
Solomon.
And one of his kids tried to take over the throne. Absalom. He tried to chase, well, he did. He chased David out, and just David's kingdom was hanging by a thread.
One of his wives was Michael, right? Or
Yeah.
Chal.
I don't know how it's pronounced, but right. Yeah. That didn't work out very well. Michal? How about Solomon? How'd that work out for him? He had a whole bunch of wives. That was a lovely thing. What did it say? Is his career just went right in the tank, right? It was a terrible thing. It didn't work out well at all. Go back even further. Abraham. He's got this handmaid, right? And then he's got the two kids. And all they do is butt heads, and they have to go apart. Just because it's in the Bible doesn't mean the Bible thinks it's a great idea, right? I love the way it's done. The Bible doesn't say polygamy is bad. It just lets you see polygamy work out. It doesn't work out well. It's kind of undermining the whole idea of polygamy. Polygamy was a big deal in that culture of the time. How about Rachel and Leah? Right? They were the wives of Jacob, and those kids, they sold Joseph into slavery. Right? I mean, it was a hassle every time it came up. So it doesn't put polygamy up on a shelf and say, oh, what a wonderful thing. It's not good at all. Now there's something mentioned in there on point 4, something mentioned in there about a bride price. And Christopher Hitchens and other atheists have said, look at this. The Israelite guys would go around and just say, how much for that woman? Okay, here you go. She's mine. And that's how they portray it. No. They weren't buying property. It was from the groom's dad to the bride's father, and the bride's father also gave some money, which the atheists won't want to talk about there. It was like a marriage gift to the bride's family, especially because the bride would be gone now and not be working around the house. And then the husband would hang on to the money that he got from the bride's father, and that woman got that if he died. Okay, so it wasn't buying somebody. It was like they do nowadays, right? A bride's family, they put on the reception, and somebody else will pay for the ceremony itself. So this is not buying brides, right? So let's get that out of everybody's head. And then you already mentioned the prisoner of war deal, right? There was no raping going on. If you captured women during a war, you could make them your wife if you wanted to, and they were treated as a full-fledged wife. They weren't secondary or something because they were from some enemy. So women are treated way better than what a lot of people think. And you're right, they're treated far better. I think you mentioned that far better in the New Testament as well. Yes?
In Genesis 2:24, that's where you go back to the first mention in the Bible. That's that's marriage. Genesis 2:24. It says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." That's two people. Doesn't say.
See, that's the ideal. That's right.
It's one.
Yep.
Two people, one flesh.
And then after the fall, it just spins down. It's terrible. By the way, I don't know if your Bible does this. We talked about this, I think, last week, but just above that in verse 23, mine's set up as a poem.
Yeah.
Is yours? That's the first poem of the Bible. Isn't that cool? It's a love poem. I just think that's really neat. First poem is Adam saying, "Wow, I like that." What do you call that? Okay, that's a woman. Right? I like that very much. Okay, so do we have to be ashamed? No. There's a lot of misconception about how women were treated in ancient Israel. Here's a biggie, right? Here's another one of them. So I'd say so far out of everything we've covered, I think one of the big complaints has been the treatment of women. Here comes another one. Hey, slavery went on in the Old Testament. What's with that? That's awful. Anybody know anything about Old Testament slavery? Because we have a misconception, I think, many of us. Are we talking about slavery as if it was in the South?
No, I think slavery in the Old Testament was almost, you gave yourself into slavery. If you owed money, then you gave yourself until you paid your debt.
Oh, you didn't do it for a lifetime.
No.
Indentured.
It was like, it was 6 years, and then the 7th year, you were freed. And you're not only freed, I don't think I'll take the time to do this, but the person who had you is supposed to give you supplies and give you generously so you can make a life, for yourself. But you're right, it's like indentured servitude. I mean, how many Americans came over and that was the start of their life here in America? They couldn't afford the passage, and they couldn't afford to buy the land when they got here, so many of them would, in a sense, sell themselves, but they learned something along the way, didn't they? They would maybe be under a silversmith or something, and then that person would have them do the dirty work, but they learned the trade. And when they were done, they'd go off and they were good at shoeing a horse or whatever it was. Some of them, of course, had run away. There were a lot of ads in the newspapers at the time looking for an indentured servant who said, "Thanks for the money, adios." But the idea was, right, you'd stay there. So you're right. This is a very different kind of slavery. It's not U.S. Southern 1800 kind of slavery. It's the first picture people think of. They were released. I won't read it, but you can find it if you want to. Deuteronomy 15 says you must give them extravagantly when they're done with their servitude. They were treated well, by the way. They were not treated like Southerners.
That's how our country started. The indentures.
Yeah.
In the 1790s, slavery, but nowadays are bringing up on George Washington. He was a slave owner. Like it's a bad thing. And it wasn't. It was until you got to the mid-1800s when they started going off the deep end. Getting away from God, really, is what happened.
And then the cotton came along. All of a sudden, Europe wanted the cotton, and how can you? That's pretty labor intensive, and you don't have the cotton gin yet, and so you got to go out by hand. Well, you need a whole bunch of people to do that. So, that was a whole different deal. The poor, number 4, the poor were protected against falling into slavery. So it wasn't a case of them trying to get more and more slaves. In fact, if you read the book of Ruth, do you remember the story of Ruth? When she and Naomi come back, Ruth is allowed, she doesn't own the land, but she's allowed to actually glean along the edges, right? She's allowed to take some of the produce or whatever it is that they've got there. And Boaz says, make sure we leave stuff for Ruth. Well, he wasn't just being especially kind to Ruth. That's what they did for the poor in those days. They allowed them to glean. I thought this was pretty cool. They would let them, if a poor person came up to a rich person and said, I really could use, I don't know, $1,000, they'd say, fine, here's $1,000, you got to pay it back, but no interest. Wouldn't you kill for an interest-free loan these days? No interest charge at all. And debts were canceled after 7 years. So if you couldn't pay that back after 7 years, God said, it's done. Take your book with your credit marks and everything, just throw it away. That person's freed of the debt. This doesn't sound like trying to drive people into slavery. Israel, in fact, was told if a foreigner came into the land as a runaway, you didn't send them back. Or you didn't keep them as a slave. You treated them as a fine individual in your community. So they were offered safety. So the main thing, even though I've got a lot of points up here, the main thing is this was not United States South, 1800s slavery, right? It's a whole different thing. So unfair. Well, here's the one that Ron mentioned a while ago. It's this whole idea of ethnic cleansing. That the Jews came into the land. They were under Joshua, if you remember the story. Moses got them through a lot of their travails. He wasn't allowed to come into the land. So Joshua comes in, and God tells them, take them out. And it says they wiped out this, and they wiped out that, and they went all over the place. Any response before you look at some of the things I want to cover? You just have to say, oh well, I mean, God's God, let God be God.
No, their whole practices were totally evil.
Oh, they were awful people. So here's our first point. You'll see it in just a second. This was not ethnic cleansing because I don't like your race, I don't like your culture, I don't like your skin color. This was a sin issue. Have you read some of the things these people did? They were so awful. They were known throughout the ancient world. Other groups would write about them and say, this is an abominable group of people there. Child sacrifice for one thing. Have you ever seen what they would do? They take a red hot idol that would have like a statue like this and put a kid on top of it and sizzle the kid. But they'd beat drums so you couldn't hear the screaming and all. But they would kill kids. There was bestiality, sex with animals, every kind of bizarre behavior possible. This was the cesspool of the ancient world, and other groups talked about it and wrote about it. Okay, so I think that's one, good point.
Yeah, we're getting closer to it. We're coming back towards it.
Yeah, if God wiped them out, you're a little worried about, where we're headed, huh? Anything else you could think?
That's the only way to eradicate evil is to get rid of every piece of it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're not doing. Yeah. And he's right.
Well, I think this will be interesting because I think there's more to it, and you can see what you think. We've talked about 1, we've talked about 2. Number 3, this was not as bloodthirsty as you may expect. Aliens and strangers were actually shown a great deal of kindness. I'm going to come down and take them out of order here. Number 6, the cities, as they would come in, were offered peace treaties with Israel. Right? That was the first thing they would do. Do you want to ally yourself to us, or do you want to fight us? It wasn't, we're going to come in and storm over the land and just wipe you all out. And here's the one that's the odd one, though. I don't know if you're going to bite on this one. Some people agree with this, some people don't. Let me start here before we go to number 4. The Bible has what's called hyperbolic language. You know what I mean by hyperbolic? It's exaggerated language. Not a lie, it's exaggerated language. David one time said, tears were my food. We would say today, maybe I couldn't sleep at all last night, I was so worried. Well, maybe you did sleep some, but you exaggerate because that's how you feel emotionally.
God under his wings.
Yeah, well, that's different than hyperbole. That's called personification, trying to turn God into something alive. Let me give you another example of hyperbole. It says in Genesis that when the famine struck Egypt, it says all nations came to Egypt. Do you think every single nation came to Egypt? There were a lot of people. I don't think all the nations, maybe a few people, but not the whole nation. And it says at several places like that, they'll use exaggerated language. We do that today. We talk about football. We'll say they got killed.
Yeah.
Well, somebody who's trying to learn a language is going, what kind of brutal sport is this? Machine guns going out there or something? We wiped them out, right? We stomped them. I mean, we do that as just colorful language. And so a lot of people think when it says we went in and we wiped the land out, that can't be true because of number 7. There was assimilation going on. Again, I think because of time I'm going to keep moving, but you'll read about them going into the land, it says, and they wiped out all the Amalekites. And then a few chapters later you find out they're intermarrying with who? The Amalekites. They're not wiped out. And it says it again and again. This group that they look like they're wiping out, they didn't wipe them out.
But
They attacked. What's that?
Isn't that the bad thing that they see? In my mind, they disobeyed God because God told them to go in and clean the land. And when you clean the land, you burn it or you do whatever. And because they didn't, the Assyrians were still alive, or the Amaleks, or whatever, and that's why they intermarried. If they would have done what God told them to do, there wouldn't have been any Amaleks to marry.
But I'm claiming that
we wouldn't have the problems that
Yeah.
God forbid.
But the Bible actually says they did it. They did wipe them out, and then find out later they really didn't wipe them out. But it's not because the Bible is lying. It's not that it's
No, I
inconsistent.
didn't say that the Bible was lying, but
Right.
I'm saying that God said
Yeah.
to wipe them out. The men, the women, the children, the cattle. I mean, he was telling them, clean the land, and
Yeah.
they didn't. That's
Yeah.
my point.
Right.
If they would have done what God told them, which is total annihilation, then they wouldn't have any Amalek people to intermarry to corrupt the Israelite people again.
Yeah.
See, to me, that was man's fault for not doing what God said.
Yeah.
Or at least that's the way I look at it.
Sure. Go ahead.
One point I don't see you listed up there. A lot of times before they came into the town, women and children would head for the hills.
Yeah. Let me point. Yeah, I'm kind of covering number 5 is sort of what you're talking about. Many of the places that they attack and talks about slaughter and all that kind of stuff, the women and the kids weren't even there. That they were more like forts and probably fairly small forts. Right? We're not talking about thousands and thousands of people here. So there's not a mass slaughter going on. Is that what you're talking about?
A part of it, but also just the nature of when the military comes into a town, you tend to have the vast majority of women and children taking off into the forest or
Right.
into the wilderness or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's the men and the fighters that stay behind.
Yeah.
And if they all got annihilated, you legitimately say they all got annihilated, but there were still many that were
Yeah.
alive because of escape.
Who show up later in future chapters and all. Right. There are only 3 cities that are ever mentioned, by the way, in ancient Israel that got wiped out. Hazor and Jericho, and there's a third one. I forgot which one. But that's it. Otherwise, it was not total destruction. I don't want you to picture the whole land burning, right? So, but it's that language like we would use for sports that they're using in the Old Testament as well.
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So when he said that he told Lot to leave and he put fire and brimstone on Sodom.
Okay, you're going back earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, okay. But is that exaggeration, or is that what happened? I mean,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't say, and every single person died in the city. We don't know. It just says, the destruction came on it. It doesn't sound like any exaggerated language. It says God strikes those towns. And
Okay. So in the New
That's okay.
Testament where it says where Damascus is going to be totally annihilated, does that mean that?
wait a minute, where does it say that? New Testament?
Yes.
It says Damascus is going to be
Yes.
annihilated? Where?
In the book of Revelation. Do you want me to show you where? Because I've been waiting for that to happen since they're in Syria.
You got me on the Damascus thing. I don't remember Damascus.
That's Old Testament.
Oh, no.
Okay, I won't take the time to look
Oh,
at it.
I'll
But
look it up.
Okay,
Are we
but go
having
ahead.
another class?
what's that?
Are we having another class?
If you guys will
I
spread the
think
word
it's
and have
in
me
the
come
book
back,
of Isaiah or something. You're right. I think it's in the Old Testament. Sorry.
that's okay.
I'm not smart like him.
So no, go ahead. So, what was your claim? So you're just wondering why it hasn't happened yet?
Or maybe it has, and it's not total like I thought. Like I
Oh.
thought Sodom and Gomorrah was like.
Yeah, it probably was. I mean, but it doesn't specifically say.
Okay.
So we're kind of up in the air on that. Yeah, there are a lot of prophecies in the Old Testament that have not happened yet, right? But some of these, but a lot of them have. Israel
Well, Damascus
being.
is the only city that's never been gone, and it's supposed to be gone.
Now you got me curious. I got to look up Damascus later on and check on that. How about as kind of a big picture here, the Old Testament versus other ancient law codes? Because we've kind of hinted at this, but I just thought this might be a good time to talk about it. Israel's laws were not the only laws in existence, right? There were other nations that had their laws set up. And so if you look at a comparison, the Old Testament laws were not awful. I mean, people look at it in isolation. They need to look at it compared to what was going on around them. I read to you some of the things that were going on with Hammurabi's law codes, the Egyptian law codes. The others had class distinctions. The rich got away with a whole lot.
That's still true.
Yeah, O.J. Simpson. The rich were treated way better. They could murder, they could kill, they could walk away from a crime, and it was like, well, okay, rich person. Not true in the Old Testament. Whoever committed the crime did the time, or whatever, right? They had the penalty on them. And a lot of those other ones, the men got treated better than the women. The women were treated like property, no doubt about it. Not in the Old Testament, right? The women had the same rights. They had equality under the law. Okay, that sounds different. And the slaves were treated as property, but not in the Old Testament. We already talked about that. So I just kind of want to make that as an overview of what we've been talking about here. Here's a conclusion. I want you to look at this. John Adams, did he know a few things? Is he a sharp guy? Yeah. One of the founding fathers. Think about this. What did the founding fathers do? They were trying to start a new government. They looked back and tried to look at previous governments, tried to look at like the Roman Empire and the Greeks and whoever. I mean, they were really well versed in their history. We don't read history and know as much history. They knew their history. So John Adams looked back among these different civilizations. He knew obviously the Hebrew one as well. And here's what he had to say. The Hebrews have done more to civilize man than any other nation. That's a pretty broad statement, huh? Civilized. Let me stop there for just a minute. One more time. The Old Testament laws that we've talked about tonight were just temporary. Right? It even says in the Old Testament, this is not for everybody. This is not going to last forever. This is not for all time. This is laws with training wheels on. Right? It's just to get people to begin to get more civilized. God expects a period of time to take place rather than just saying, you've got to act perfect right now. So there's this time where kind of a breaking in time. And that's the Old Testament laws. We don't go by those today because we've had time to kind of work ourselves through some of these things. So he says the Hebrews, though, took that first step, right? They civilized people more than any other nation. They preserved and propagated to humankind the doctrine of a supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign of the universe, which I believe to be the great essential principle of all morality and consequently of all civilization. Let me go back to that because that's really good. Well, obviously he's talking about God there, right? Is the picture of God, because he's saying this is the kind of God that the Hebrews got across to people. Is this a different kind of God than the other gods that were existent at the time? Do you know anything about some of the other ancient gods? Is this God a different God?
Yeah, love.
Yeah. I mean, these other gods were pretty darn vengeful, right? But they were the kind of gods, if you did the right ritual, they would probably be okay, right? So if you sacrificed a kid, if you cut yourself, I mean, whatever it is, if you did certain things, the god almost had to do something for you, right? So they were kind of tied to you. They really weren't way above you, right? You could bend their will to you. It was all those strange rituals that went on. Yes?
They're all man-made.
Sure.
There weren't any gods because if you read Isaiah 44:8, God says, "Is there any God beside me? I don't know of any."
Yeah.
God said that.
Yeah. That's a good verse to take Mormons to, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? Because Mormonism is polygamous.
Yeah.
It's got a whole bunch of gods. If you hang in there, you can be a god.
Is the word.
What's that?
Polytheistic.
Polytheistic,
They're also
thank you.
polygamous.
Yeah. Polytheistic, that's right. Exactly. But look at the God that we have that first got introduced to us in the Old Testament. He's not... Do you ever read about those Greek gods? They're like overgrown kids. They're vindictive and they cheat on each other and it's just chaotic, right? Many of the gods are real chaotic. They can't control the universe. Stuff is kind of too big for them and they're kind of out of control, right? So they're crazy. But it says... Instead, we get a supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign of the universe. And he says, because of that, that's the great principle of all morality. Just stop there for just a minute. That's a really interesting point. Where do we get our morality? Well, it's either from you and I, we just make up our own morality, or it's from our society, or it's from a higher source. Now, we got big problems if it's one of the first two. If you and I, all of us in here, if we make up our own morality, is that a problem?
Yes.
Yeah, there's one word for that, anarchy. Right? If we make up our own morality?
You can change it.
You could change it tomorrow. You want to be nice today? Okay. You don't want to be nice tomorrow? Okay. It's your morality. So now you got Mother Teresa and you got Adolf Hitler. And if you say, well, we just make up our own morality, you can't really say one's better than the other. It's just one decided to do different things, right? He or she is just making up his own morality. Martin Luther King, Gandhi, we would say they're really nice people, but it's just because they decide to make up that kind of morality. Are they any different than Joseph Stalin? I mean, what's the difference, right? You're just making it up as you go. Well, is it any better if you say, well, okay, it's not the individual, it's the whole society makes up morality. Is that a benefit? Now it's not just one person. In this country, it's 300 million of us. You don't like that?
No, look at our morality right now. A whole bunch of people have decided that what God has to say is wrong. That's
Okay.
not a morality at all.
Yeah, societies change, right? Do you want to base your morality on something that over time can change? 150 years ago, everybody's okay with slavery. Nobody wants to go back to that. 51% probably would have voted for slavery at least. So does that make it okay because 51% of your society wants to do something? Absolutely not. I don't want that kind of morality. It changes too. Maybe it changes more slowly than individual morality, but that doesn't work. So what are we left with? This is what John Adams is saying, and this is what you get in the Old Testament for the first time, is that there is a God above everybody, above culture, above the individual, who sets these rules up, and we all say, okay, I reject it or I accept it, and I'll go with that. Otherwise, it's chaos. And consequently, he says, of all civilizations. So, good thing John Adams saw it clearly. A lot of people don't today. But I will stick around if you have some questions, because I know I gave you a lot of information. Look at the bottom of the page. There's an email deal on there. I'll be glad to send you like some of the verses, or, I machine gunned a lot of stuff at you this evening. And last time I think I took it right up the last minute there, and everybody had to go. So, if I can answer any questions, I will stay here. Thank you. It was 2 weeks of this was fun. So.
Yes, it was very interesting.
I just would have a thought that, the goal of this partly is that we are prepared to give an answer.
Yep.
As we're commanded to.
That's
do.
right.
To give an answer for the faith that we have.
Yeah.
And to do it in a wise and intelligent and a winsome way.
Yes, respectful.
By the same token, if you are in discussion with those people who are truly atheists, there is a spiritual dimension that it's like other things. We understand this spiritually. They will not.
Yeah.
And we have to recognize that's a huge gap.
Yeah.
We don't convince them by the power of our intellect or by the power of our arguments.
Yeah.
The only way they will ever see it as we see it is when they know the Lord.
That's the beauty, isn't it? I mean, the apologetics is saying God saves. We just throw the seed out, right? And if it blooms, then that's great. And if it doesn't, it wasn't our job. We're just supposed to be faithful to present it. You're right. So I hope you walk away from this realizing that's a great point. We're not twisting arms, and we're not arguing people into the kingdom. That's all up to God. All we have to do is be faithful and be ready, right? Because you will hear maybe some of these things. Yeah.
To answer that, America started as a Judeo-Christian nation.
Yeah.
The Jews and Christians believed the same God.
Yeah.
All over the buildings, there. If you've ever, like on some of the emails you see, everywhere. It's just Bible verses and Moses. And
who's in the Supreme Court? Moses.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and all that. And our Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Nature's God.
Yeah. We hold these truths to be self-evident. They said we don't even have to argue this. It's self-evident. All people are created in the image of God, right? So we're endowed by our Creator with certain rights.
Yeah, and laws are good because they govern over moral people. But when you lose morality, which we are losing, then laws are worthless because they have no foundation.
Yeah, because
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, but you're right.
Damascus is in Isaiah 17.
Okay. Right next to Revelation.
Yeah, right. Okay, it's not nice to make fun of it. But I knew it was in there.
It's in there, man.
Well, thank you for taking a Monday evening when you had probably 1,000 other things to do. To come out.
Thank you for coming.